I returned to my hometown after 10 years away. I thought I had buried this place with the rest of my childhood, but when my aunt passed, the old house became mine. Everyone said the town hadn't changed. The gas station still stood at the edge of the main road. The diner still served burnt coffee. The woods still bordered the northern edge, where the path waited. Locals called it the Hollow Path. As kids, we were warned not to go there. Some said people heard things. Others said they never came back at all. I didn't believe any of it. I was stubborn enough to prove to myself that fear belonged only to children. I set out in the late afternoon. The sun cut long shadows between the trees, and the soil was damp from a week of rain. I followed the narrow trail, pushing past ferns that brushed against my jeans. The forest smelled like wet earth and pine. At first it felt almost peaceful. Then I heard it, a voice. It said my name, clear, quiet, and close. I spun around, expecting to see someone walking behind me, but the path was empty. The woods were silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves. I told myself it was the wind. But then I heard it again, my name, spoken softly, almost kindly. I gripped the straps of my backpack and forced myself to keep walking. The trail bent left and right, deeper into the woods. I tried not to look behind me. Every time the breeze shifted, I thought I heard another whisper, my name stretched out longer. At one point, the voice stopped calling me and instead repeated something else, a phrase I hadn't said aloud since I was a teenager. I don't belong here. The word struck me like a memory. That was what I used to write in my notebooks when I felt trapped in this town. It was private, a thought I never shared. Hearing it aloud made my chest tighten. The whispers multiplied. They started repeating fragments of thoughts I had that very moment. When I thought, I need to get out, the voice echoed it back immediately, as if the forest had reached into my head. I quickened my pace. The trail ahead curved, sunlight dimming as branches closed overhead. My heart raced. I just needed to reach the end. Except when I finally saw an opening, I walked into a small clearing I didn't remember. In the center was a patch of moss, bright green against the dark soil. I bent down. Something thin stuck out from under the moss, like a piece of paper weathered by time. I pulled it free with shaking hands. It was one of my old letters. The handwriting was mine, shaky but familiar. It was the kind of letter I used to write late at night, addressed to no one. Words of frustration, fear, and longing to leave. The edges were torn and the ink had faded, but I recognized every sentence. I froze. My letters had never left my bedroom drawer, yet here they were, buried under moss in a forest I hadn't entered in years. The voices around me grew louder. Now dozens of whispers overlapped, all repeating the lines I once wrote. I hate this town. I'm disappearing. No one will understand. I dropped the paper and stumbled back. My pulse pounded in my ears. I turned toward the path, desperate to leave. But when I walked forward, I found myself back in the same clearing. The moss. The letters. The voices. I tried again, this time running, ignoring the branches that scratched my arms. The trail twisted, but it always brought me back to the clearing. No matter which direction I chose, I circled back to the same spot. The whispers grew bolder. Now they weren't just repeating my thoughts. They were ahead of me. They spoke my next words before I could think them. You're trapped. You'll never leave. You already belong to us. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside my head, stealing every thought before it formed. And then I saw something else. Underneath the moss, more scraps of paper pushed up, as if the ground itself was spitting them out. Pages from my old journals. Letters I never mailed, even drawings from my school notebooks. The forest wasn't just echoing me. It was holding everything I ever tried to hide. I wanted to scream, but I knew the forest would take that too. I tore my eyes away from the moss and forced myself to breathe. My hand shook so badly that the papers I had picked up slipped from my fingers. They melted back into the ground, like the soil was swallowing them. I turned and ran again. My shoes pounded against the dirt path, lungs burning, arms flailing at branches that clawed at my jacket. I kept telling myself, there has to be a way out. But every bend in the trail dragged me back to the clearing. The forest had no exit. The whispers no longer sounded distant. They pressed against my skull, a constant murmur. When I tried to think of my mother, the voices spoke her name first. When I thought of the town, the forest repeated my image of its streets before I could picture them myself. I wasn't leading my own mind anymore. I crouched down, clutching my head. The voices overlapped, hundreds of them, all mine, all stolen. Then a sharper sound cut through, a single voice, louder, clearer, and not mine. Stay. It came from behind me. I turned. At the edge of the clearing, half hidden in shadow, stood a figure. Not solid. The outline wavered like heat rising from asphalt. No face, no clear shape, just the blur of something human. It tilted its head toward me. I felt a sudden pull inside my chest, as if it had hooked into the center of me. The whispers grew silent, leaving only that figure's voice in my mind. You left your words here. You left yourself here. You were still ours. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No, I muttered, though my voice broke. I never left anything here. The figure stepped closer. The moss shifted under its presence, and more scraps of paper surfaced. My childhood handwriting covered them, sentences I remembered and some I didn't. One line caught my eye, written in ink I didn't recall using. You will return. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse. The air pressed heavy against my skin. I tried to bolt again, but my legs barely obeyed. The path blurred, and no matter where I ran, I ended back at that figure, at that moss. It whispered again, not in words this time, but in rhythm, syncing with my heartbeat. My pulse matched its pattern until I couldn't tell which was mine. I screamed, though it felt useless. The sound came back, distorted, repeated by the trees around me, until the forest screamed with me. My chest heaved, and I dropped to my knees. I clawed at the moss, ripping it away until my hands touched damp soil. Beneath, more papers, dozens, hundreds, a lifetime of my thoughts that shouldn't be there, and in the deepest layer I found a page I had not yet written. The handwriting was mine, but it described this very moment, my arrival. The whispers, the figure, the pages in the earth. Every step of what I was living, already recorded. At the bottom of the page, one last sentence waited. You never left the hollow path. The figure loomed above me. The forest hummed with my own stolen voice. I realized then that the path hadn't trapped me. It had simply kept me where I had always been. When I finally stood, the papers dissolved into the ground and the whispers quieted. The forest didn't need to chase me anymore, because it already had me. I had camped in forests before, but nothing like this. That night, deep in the woods, the silence felt too heavy. We had hiked far from the trail, thinking isolation would make the trip more exciting. There were 5 of us: Claire, Martin, Olivia, Jacob, and me. The first day went as planned. We pitched tents near a small clearing, started a fire, and joked about ghost stories. Claire teased that the trees were watching us. We laughed, but I remember how her eyes lingered on the dark line of pines, as if she half believed it. It was the second night when things changed. I woke to a sound that wasn't part of the forest. Not wind, not animals. Whispering. Dozens of voices, faint but steady, like a crowd speaking in low tones just outside the tent. I thought maybe it was a dream. Then I heard Martin shift in his sleeping bag and mutter, "Do you hear that?" We all froze. The whispering did not stop. It circled the tent, never rising, never fading. Olivia whispered back, "It sounds like people." Jacob unzipped the tent flap before we could stop him. Cold air rushed in. He stepped outside with a flashlight. His voice trembled. "There's no one here." But when he swung the beam across the clearing, I noticed something. The trees seemed closer. They stood at strange angles, their trunks leaning inward as if they had shifted during the night. "Guys," Jacob said, his voice tight, "look at the tree line. It wasn't like that before." We stood together outside the tent, the fire just embers. The forest felt wrong. The whispering had stopped the moment Jacob left the tent, but the silence that followed pressed against my ears. We went back inside, trying to calm each other. None of us slept much. By the third night, the whispering returned, louder, closer, as if it seeped straight into the fabric of the tent. The circle of trees had drawn tighter. Branches loomed above like bent arms closing in. Claire wouldn't stop crying. Martin tried to stay rational. He said, maybe we had gotten turned around and the forest looked different because of shadows. But when Olivia pointed out that the path we came from was gone, swallowed by endless rows of identical trunks, none of us argued. The fourth night broke us. The whispers started earlier, just after sunset, and this time they carried rhythm. Words we couldn't understand. Then, among those whispers, a single clear voice repeated what we said, but delayed, as if mocking. When Jacob yelled, "Who's there?" the voice came back, "Who's there?" A second later, deeper stretched. I remember gripping a lantern so tightly that my hand cramped. That was when I saw it. Between two pines, a figure darker than the forest itself. It didn't move. It just stood there, head tilted, listening. And when I whispered to the others, "Don't look at it," the figure whispered back, "Don't look at it." We argued in whispers, afraid the thing might echo us again. Claire wanted to run. Martin insisted we wait for daylight. But there was no daylight anymore, not in the way we remembered. The sky above looked pale gray, heavy like dawn that never arrived. We tried to pack up in silence. Every snapped twig felt too loud. The figure never moved, yet the forest did. The trees leaned tighter, bark creaking, roots twisting just beneath the ground. When we finally set out, the path was gone. No trail, no clearing, only walls of trees in every direction. We picked a direction and forced ourselves through branches until our arms bled from scratches. After hours of walking, we stumbled back into the same clearing. Our fire pit was still warm. That night, the whispers pressed closer, brushing our ears. It felt like being surrounded by hundreds of mouths just out of sight. The figure had moved closer, too. It now stood at the edge of the firelight. Martin tried shouting at it, demanding to know what it wanted. Seconds later, the reply came, warped and low, what it wanted. Then the trees shivered, leaves rustling without wind. Claire broke down. She begged us not to speak. But silence didn't save us. The whispers began mimicking our breaths, short and panicked until I could not tell which inhalations were mine. Olivia lit another fire, bigger, hoping the light would drive it back. For a while it worked. The shadows pulled away, the whispers faded. But firewood ran out. As the flames died, the circle of trees pressed in tighter than before. When the fire finally collapsed into ash, the figure stepped forward. Its outline blurred with the trees, its limbs too long, bending wrong. It tilted its head the way a predator studies prey. We huddled together. Nobody spoke. My chest felt crushed from holding back words. Then Jacob whispered, too low to stop himself, "Please." The echo came back. "Please." But this time it didn't come from the figure. It came from the trees themselves. Bark split. Voices poured from the cracks, hundreds speaking at once, repeating Jacob's plea. We ran, blind, desperate, clawing through branches. But the forest shifted beneath us. Every step led us deeper, not farther. The trees bent, blocking paths, funneling us back to the clearing. When we returned, the figure waited inside the circle, no longer still. It mouthed our words before we spoke them, like it knew what we would say. Martin shouted in anger, but his voice did not echo. The figure's mouth moved first this time. It spoke his words before he did, a second ahead. That was when I realized it wasn't repeating us anymore. It was learning to speak before we did. Claire collapsed, sobbing. Olivia held her. Jacob grabbed my arm and whispered, "If it knows what we say next, it knows what we do next." The figure raised one hand, slowly, deliberately. The trees bent with it. We understood then. The forest wasn't closing in. We were already inside it. I never thought silence could feel so heavy until I pulled over on that narrow dirt road, deep inside the forest. The trees pressed close from every side, branches twisting like veins across the fading sky. My car's headlights threw pale cones across the trunks, then died when I switched the engine off. I had driven for 3 hours to reach this remote spot. My plan was simple. Test the limits of my old shortwave radio, see what strange signals I could catch far from city noise. I set up a folding chair, clipped the antenna wire between 2 trees, and placed the battered receiver on a small table. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Static hissed, broken by the occasional burst of a distant voice, number stations, and faint music warped by distance. I scribbled notes in my log, feeling the same quiet thrill I always did when picking up something rare. Then I found it. A sharp click cut through the static. A low hum followed, steady and unnatural. I leaned closer, adjusting the dial. The hum cracked into sound, and I froze. Whispers. They were faint, like breath brushing the inside of my ears. I pulled the headphones tighter, thinking maybe I was imagining it. But the words came clearer, syllables snapping into focus. "He's sitting down." The voice was soft, almost genderless. My pen slipped in my hand. I looked around. No one. Just the wall of trees and the empty road. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. Nobody could have known. "He's looking left now." I jerked my head forward, eyes fixed on the receiver. My pulse pounded in my throat. It was describing me. Not just what I did, but the exact second I did it. I tested it. I raised my hand slowly, deliberately. He's lifting his hand. The voice matched me, perfectly timed. My mouth went dry. I yanked off the headphones, but the radio kept spilling whispers through its tiny speaker. I could hear them without the set pressed against me. I told myself it was a prank. Some sick transmission from another hobbyist with equipment strong enough to intercept me. But deep inside, I knew no prankster could track my every twitch in real time. I should have packed up and left. Instead, I did the opposite. I strapped the headphones back on and turned the dial, hunting for the source. The whispers shifted with me, always describing, never pausing. He is breathing faster. He is turning the knob. He is standing. Every move I made echoed back a half-second later. I stood in the clearing, eyes sweeping the tree line. The forest was still, but I felt watched from all angles. I packed the radio into its case and slung it over my shoulder. If someone was transmitting, the signal had to come from somewhere nearby. The antenna pointed roughly north. That was enough. I walked into the trees. The air was damp, thick with moss and earth. Each step sank into the soft ground. My flashlight carved tunnels of pale light through the branches, catching glimpses of bark and fog. The whispers grew louder, clearer, until they no longer sounded distorted by static. He is walking deeper. He is stepping on wet leaves. He is turning his light to the right. I stopped. My chest heaved, and the voice followed with perfect accuracy. He is stopping. He is breathing hard. The signal was close, too close. I turned off the flashlight and stood in the dark. For a moment, silence. Then, softer than ever, the whispers returned. He is standing in darkness. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself forward. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity, maybe pride. maybe the pull of something I couldn't name. The deeper I went, the stronger it became. Static bled away until the whispers were crisp, like someone speaking directly into my ear. My skin prickled. I felt them circling me, though I saw nothing. He is thinking about leaving. My heart stopped. They weren't just describing actions anymore. They were describing my thoughts. I spun, flashlight snapping on, stabbing beams between the trunks. Nothing moved. No footprints, no shadows, just silence between trees. I gritted my teeth and kept going. The forest thinned into a hollow, an open pocket where fog clung low to the ground. In the center stood a broken wooden post, splintered and blackened, like it had been struck by lightning. The radio on my shoulder buzzed hard, louder than it ever had before. The whispers screamed through the headphones. "He is here." My knees weakened when I heard those words. I forced myself to steady the flashlight beam on the broken post. Nothing. No wires, no devices, no reason for the signal to spike here. The whispers didn't stop. They pressed harder, overlapping, layers of voices stacking until it felt like a crowd had gathered around me, speaking into my skull. He is looking at the post. He is gripping the light tighter. He is afraid. I swallowed and raised the radio from my shoulder. The meter needle slammed into the far end, red and trembling. The source was right here, but nothing stood in front of me. Just rotting wood and fog. I tried to turn the dial, but my hand froze when the voices shifted. He is about to speak. I hadn't said a word, but I was about to. I shut my mouth, forcing silence. He is holding it back. I stumbled back a step. The fog swirled as if something had moved through it. My flashlight shook in my grip, the beam cutting jagged paths through the hollow. Then I realized I didn't need the radio anymore. The headphones slipped off my ears. The receiver buzzed in the mud, but the voices carried on around me, louder, closer, no static at all. He is standing alone. He is turning around. He is looking behind. I spun. Nothing but trees. My chest heaved, breath clouding the air. I bolted from the hollow. My legs pumped, but the voices never lost me. They tracked every desperate move. He is running. He is tripping. He is hurting his knee. I hit the ground hard, the flashlight skidding away. The pain in my leg flared white hot, and a half-second later the voices confirmed it. He is crawling. I pushed myself up, grabbing the light and staggering forward. My thoughts tumbled, panic breaking order, and the voices kept pace. He thinks he won't make it. He thinks something is following. He thinks the trees are moving. I screamed for them to stop. My voice tore through the forest. The whispers answered as one. He is screaming. The sound came from behind me. Not from the trees, not from the air, but from a point right over my shoulder. I felt the warmth of a breath that wasn't mine. I froze. My body refused to move. Slowly, against everything inside me, I turned my head. The voices stopped. The forest went silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. I stared into the blackness behind me, my light trembling in my hand. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then I heard it. Not through headphones, not through the radio, right at my ear. He is looking at nothing. I dropped the flashlight. Darkness swallowed me whole.